Hello, my name is Lynette Pearson, a PGS student of Cornerstone University. Today I will be summarizing some main points of Chapter 1 from the book Learning from a Stranger, subheading How Not to Bless a Nation. And I will be sharing what I agree and disagree with the reading. And I will also identify a theory and framework or study at the end of the video. The story of Abraham and Sarah really is a story of faith. The background of Abraham, the Bible tells us that God made a covenant with Abraham, and he called him to leave his family and go to an unknown land. Therefore, God promised to make a great nation from Abraham and to bless him and curse those who curse him. This story can be referenced in the book of Genesis, chapter 12 and 23. Abraham was a man that was well respected and vowed never to forsake God. Abraham followed God even in the most challenging circumstances. He was even blessed by God, even in his tender old age, to have a child with Sarah. Keep in mind that even though God found favor in Abraham and he was viewed as a faithful man, he still compromised God's instructions. Now let's look from the lens of the author learning from a stranger. We see that Abraham's faith and integrity is not perfect. Remember, Abraham was a man of faith, but at this time, Abraham feared what could happen and asked Sarah to say that she was his sister as a way to prove her love. The chapter enlightens us on how Abraham, a stranger in an unfamiliar place and land, that heightened his fear. Due to knowledge he received of being a place of poor behavior, habits, cultural differences, and people that could not hear from God. Abraham could only think of this place would have an uneasy welcome to strangers. I want to pause here for a second. Um, Sometimes we can receive partial knowledge to judge others that can be incorrect. We can stereotype others that allow our own prejudices to surface. In this circumstance, I agree with the writer that Abraham had a moment of being powerless in a strange land. The chapter gives a clear picture of understanding and knowing who God is, his presence, faithfulness, his promise to protect, and four factors that are listed in the chapter. Number one, fear. Two, power. Three, partial knowledge. And four, spiritual horizons. On the other hand, from my perspective, I think the four factors being a pivotal part of the story should focus on the core premise of the story: divine grace, Abraham's loyalty, God's blessing to Abraham, and God's blessing through Abraham. The chapter goes beyond tolerating and diversity. When encountering others that do not look like us, act, or believe like ourselves, rather, a focus towards intercultural learning is at the center. We are affected by cultural diversity daily. The story encourages humility and hospitality to strangers. It is a test of our faith in how Jesus called us to love our neighbor, even though we are different. The author does a great job at giving insight and experience and how humility and hospitality plays a major part in our lives and in our Christian walk. Abraham feared his safety was in jeopardy, and he showed very little trust in God's protection. This may be the only time that Abraham felt powerless again, and being in a different community as an outsider. Although his life demonstrates to us how we benefit from believing what God says despite the turmoil. We must believe in God's promise. Our faith is often challenged by fear of the unknown, as Abraham experienced. The Christian perspective, I believe that Bowman and Deal's symbolic frame aligns with the author's perspective and story. The symbolic frame focuses on issues of meaning and faith. Also, Abraham struggled with Christian integrity by asking his wife to tell people that she was his sister. Also, Abraham had his own knowledge of the land prior to arriving there. He used that interpretation or experience to judge them. According to the author, it is possible to be a blessing in spite of cultural differences, but only if learning takes place and cannot be off limits to restricted to missionaries. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 3 and 5 to trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not on your own understanding. Abraham failed to trust in God's promise. Psalms 85 and 11 says, truth springs up from the earth and righteousness smiles down from heaven. Thank you for viewing my YouTube video. Keep the faith and bye for now.